Hello and welcome, friends. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. If you are new here, welcome. And if you're back, welcome back. I greatly appreciate all of the ongoing support. This is my channel, Dragon's Jewel Creative Gems, and I'm Tegan. And I'm just going to get all those wonderful YouTube-y stuff out of the way. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, please consider doing so. It's just down below. And if you like the content, please make sure you're hitting the like button on the videos. And of course, if you want to share some love down in the comments below, it's always greatly appreciated. And I absolutely love reading them. I do my best to make sure that I respond back and share some love in your direction as well, because naturally without you, this channel wouldn't exist. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I thought I would bring some of those Halloween spooky vibes to the channel. There are going to be in the WIP and Chat style format, but I'm going to read some ghost stories of Alberta, which is the province that I reside in. So I will have a spooky canvas that I'll be working on, and then I'm going to read a couple of ghost stories so that you can listen along while you dab and paint, or work on another craft, or what you normally do during WIP and Chats kind of thing, and I keep you company with some spooky tales from my province. So I figured that would be fun. The Spirit of the Stately Old Residence. I met Betty Harris one wonderfully cold and bright afternoon in November 1994. While doing a reading in the northwest of our province, Betty had developed something of an interest in Alberta ghosts many years ago when, as a teenager in Lethbridge, she had lived in a haunted house. One evening when I was about 16, a friend, whom we shall call Jack, and I walked past a historic old house in Lethbridge. Betty began. My friend suddenly became very agitated and said there was something about the house that bothered him immensely. He seemed very disturbed and was relieved when we had passed by. By coincidence, less than a year later, Betty's parents bought the stately old 3-story place as their family home. As soon as the Harrises were unpacked and settled in, Betty invited Jack over for a visit. The boy's reaction to being inside the house was considerably more bizarre than the discomfort he had felt the year before when he and Betty had walked past it. As the teens toured first the main floor and then the second story of the house, Jack remained composed. It wasn't until he tried to climb the staircase leading to the home's 3rd story that everything changed. He was physically unable to mount the stairs leading to the 3rd story. I watched as he grasped the banister, lifted his foot to the first step, and then strained against some invisible force that prevented him from advancing, Betty recalled. The same held true for descending the basement stairs, showing that she had a very practical nature even as a teenager. I must confess I thought it was just theatrics on his part. She and Jack set the incident as far aside as they could and continued to enjoy their friendship. There is perhaps no place as important to teenage girls as their bedroom. The privacy and security provided by a girl's bedroom can create a sanctuary in an often troubled world. Betty explained that her bedroom in her family's new home was on the 2nd floor of the house and overlooked the front yard. Right after we moved in, I noticed that as I lay on it, my bed would occasionally begin to gently shake back and forth. I was puzzled and tried to find an explanation. Was there traffic going by outside? Were the washers and dryer located on the same level of the house, running and causing the floor and bed to vibrate? Was the furnace causing the house to shudder as it switched on and off? None of these explanations panned out. I asked my parents whose bedroom was just across the hall, but they hadn't noticed anything and passed the whole thing off, Betty remembered. Eventually, Betty gave up looking for an explanation for her swaying bed and just accepted it as a quirky addition to her life. It didn't frighten me, it was very gentle and benign. If I woke up in the night and my bed was shaking, it would feel more like being rocked back to sleep than anything else, she said. On one occasion, however, the shaking turned out to be a different purpose. One night my boyfriend, not Jack, and I had a disagreement. He became upset and left, saying that nobody understood him. I had no idea just how upset he was until later that night I was jolted out of my sleep by a violently shaking bed. It had never shaken with such force before. At first I thought, oh, it's just the bed shaking, and I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. I kept getting this nagging feeling that I should go to the window, Betty explained. Finally, in exasperation, I thought I'd just get up and go to the window and get it out of my system. To this day, Betty is grateful for having acted on that impulse. As I peered out the window, I made out a shape huddled on the front lawn. It was my boyfriend. He had slashed his wrists and was laying in a pool of blood. If my bed shaking hadn't wakened me, and if I hadn't obeyed the urge to go to the window, he would have died a very short time later out there on the lawn. Clearly, whatever force was at work in that historical mansion knew that, without intervention, a tragedy would have occurred. Though the man whose life was saved and Betty are no longer in touch with one another, the incident remains understandably vivid memory for the woman. No wonder she ventured out that November afternoon in 1994 to hear me reading about other people's experiences in our spirit-filled province. Haunted in High Level. Some stories took amazingly indirect routes to my mailbox, and the following tale currently falls into that category. I called the Galt Museum in Lethbridge in an attempt to get the story of a haunted house in Fort Macleod, and ended up with a ghost story from High Level, at virtually the opposite corner of the province. The people involved in the story consist of a wife and mother, Melina, her husband Calvin, and their two sons, Kaylin and Stefan, and their boarder, Glenn. The five moved into a rented farmhouse about 35 kilometers east of the town of High Level on October 1st, 1992. The building was about 30 years old at the time and was about 1 kilometer away from the nearest neighbor. The strange experiences began within the first month. As Calvin and Glenn stood at the entrance to the kitchen, a bottle of liquid detergent on the counter caught their eye. It rocked back and forth so vigorously that it should have fallen on its side. The two men watched in silence until the phenomenon stopped of its own accord. When the bottle stood still again, Glenn jokingly suggested the house might be haunted, and then the men continued the interrupted conversation. Several weeks later, Calvin and Melina stayed up later than usual to enjoy each other's company. Throughout the evening, the power flickered off and on for no apparent reason. Shortly after the couple finally turned in for the night, they heard the distinctive sound of a car door slamming 2 or 3 times. As Glenn had been out for the evening, Calvin assumed that their boarder had returned home. He got out of bed to open the door for the man and stared in disbelief at the empty yard. Shaken, he returned to bed. As the two settled back to try to sleep, they heard footsteps coming from the attic, followed by a loud crash. We were both quite frightened, Melina remembered. Moments later, they heard a loud crash, but neither Calvin nor Melina could tell which part of the house the sound came from. At this point, 18-month-old Stefan woke up crying inconsolably. His parents knew something unusual had disturbed their son because he had been sleeping soundly through the night since infancy. To the couple's dismay, that incident broke the child's previously sound sleeping pattern. They discovered if they put Stefan to bed in that particular room where he had been placed, he wouldn't sleep through the night. Within months, they began calling the room the ghost room and had all but stopped using it. In addition to interrupted sleep, Melina noted that this bedroom was always cold, or at least colder than every other room in the house. One evening, long after putting her sons to bed, Melina sat reading in the living room. Neither Calvin nor Glenn was home at the time. Melina watched in horror as the door to an unoccupied bedroom slowly opened and closed several times over the period of a few minutes. The last incident triggered the end of Melina's tolerance and unquestioning acceptance of the strange occurrences in her home. We knew of a woman who lived a couple of hours away who could sense ghosts and how they felt and if they were good or evil. We asked her to come to the house, and she did. She walked through the whole house and said she most definitely felt a presence. This presence, the woman told them, was in the bedroom they stopped using, the one they called the ghost room. She said she felt the ghost was very sad and did not mean us any harm. Before her visit, Calvin and I were talking of moving out. This woman said that the ghost trusted us and was upset that we were thinking of leaving. It wanted to make itself known to us, Melina reported. The spirit's attention-getting behaviors didn't end there. One afternoon, shortly after Melina tucked the boys in for the afternoon nap, she heard someone calling Mummy. She checked on the children immediately because although the voice seemed to come from the room where Stefan lay sleeping, the child could only say Mama and had not yet mastered Mummy. However, both children lay quietly asleep. Melina explained she heard Mummy herself a few times, and that it happened twice for Calvin when I was not home. Melina and her family stayed surprisingly calm during these incidents and approached the occurrences with an admirably pragmatic attitude. What Melina referred to as a major incident would have had lesser souls calling for the moving truck. She began to hear banging noises at night. The sounds emanated from the wall connecting with the ghost room. I would hear the banging, which sounded like a steady knocking sound. I would wake Calvin up and the noises would immediately stop. After Calvin fell asleep again, the knocking began again. Each time I woke Calvin, the noise would stop. At some point, Stefan would wake up crying hysterically. Other noises from this wall were tapping and vibrating sounds. Since Stefan's crib was up against the wall, we thought maybe Stefan, as he moved in his sleep, caused the banging. We even tested it out by banging the crib against the wall while one of us was in our bedroom, but there was no noticeable noise. One day, as I was standing in that bedroom, the ghost room, I noticed the child-sized wooden rocking chair next to the crib. I started rocking it with my hand. It banged against the wall and produced the exact same noise that we had heard in the night. After Melina and Calvin moved Stefan from this room, they never heard the banging again. Melina knew that the previous tenant, a man of the house, practiced strange religion customs involving the devil and evil. The lady who had sensed the spirit in their house had told the family that they must never let this man back into their house. One day the man showed up and preached his religion for me for nearly an hour on my front step. I did not let him enter the house. He mentioned to me that what was in the house was definitely the devil trying to possess our souls. Needless to say, we dismissed and disregarded his ideas. That night, as I was putting Stefan to bed, something strange happened. The room was dark. I was sitting on the floor next to the crib singing when a loud hissing noise filled the room. I was terrified. I grabbed Stefan, put on the light, and ran out of the room. The ghost was obviously upset that I had allowed the religious man near the house. I heard that the man's family claims they had no spooky incidents or experience happen to them while they lived in the house for 2 years. That spring, the family held a joint birthday party for their sons, Kaylin and Stefan. Happy chaos reigned throughout the house that day. By evenings, toys lay scattered around, including a large metal toy tractor in the laundry room. On top of the tractor lay a purple saw toy. Melina's sister and family were visiting and decided to stay the night. The only bedroom available was the one the family had stopped using. In the middle of the night, Melina's sister heard a loud crash. She got up thinking one of the kids woke up. She checked all the kids, but they were all asleep. She walked into the laundry room and noticed the tractor was turned upside down, with the purple saw underneath it. Everyone else was sleeping at the time, Melina remarked. The family avoided using the bedroom whenever possible, but occasionally it became necessary to use it. When Melina tried to put Kaylin, her 4-year-old son, to bed in the ghost room, he seemed unable to relax. Melina lay beside him to help the child fall asleep, but to no avail. Kaylin lay on his back, very stiffly, right up against me. I asked him to move over, and he refused. He was staring towards the ceiling. He said he heard a noise and claimed he saw something spinning, Melina recalled. My husband and I never said anything in front of the kids about what was happening in the house, she admitted. That night, Kaylin relaxed only after Melina moved him to another area of the house. We know that animals often sense paranormal presences far more accurately than humans do. The actions of the family's cats may have been evidence that they sensed something unusual. The first time the oldest cat went into the ghost room, the animal scurried frantically around the room, pausing only to paw at the floor. Oddly, the room later became the cat's favorite, the room of choice for its catnaps. When the family brought a second cat home, the younger animal reacted exactly as the other cat had when it approached the ghost room for the first time. Afterwards, it too preferred to sleep in that room. The younger cat occasionally perked up its ears as though it heard something and scurried into its favorite room. Both cats loved to stare into the closet of that bedroom, even though to the human eye the closet appeared to be empty. Whatever possessed the house made itself known to Melina's mother one evening as she babysat her grandsons. She heard a car door slam and prepared to greet her daughter and son-in-law, but they weren't home yet, and there was no vehicle in the yard. The family eventually accepted nightly banging and crashing sounds, and even the sounds of footsteps from the attic as normal for that house. Nevertheless, they routinely checked for a source, but never found one. Even after little Stefan had been given a new bedroom, he continued to be disturbed by the ghost room. One night, he woke up crying. "Baby," the child informed his mother. He pointed across the hall to his old bedroom and announced, "That one." The family moved from the house on September 30th, 1993, and apparently left the spirit behind. The memories of living in a haunted house, however, will likely never leave them. The Little Boy and the Lady. Many of the dramas that make up our lives are played out in our homes. If the trauma is forceful enough, something of a psychic imprint can remain long after the event itself is over, and even for the most part, forgotten about. Considering this effect, it should be no surprise that we have so many haunted houses. In fact, it's probably only surprising that we don't have more. The following story about a house in Islay, near Lloydminster, certainly falls into the justifiably haunted category. By the late 1980s, the Alberta Wheat Pool was suspending the practice of providing housing for its employees. One by one, it was selling off the many houses it owned in the small towns that dot Alberta's landscape. One of these dwellings was a 2-story place with a tragic recent history. Apparently, a former Wheat Pool employee murdered his wife in the company house. Sometime later, a young couple with a 3-year-old boy bought the house. At first, when the youngster began to tell his parents about the lady upstairs, they paid very little attention to his stories. presuming they were only hearing the fruits of a child's fertile imagination. He said she was nice and came to him often, according to the woman who relayed the story to me. The child was so accepting of his visitor that his mother now realizes that she might never have known about her son's strange companion if it hadn't been for a concern of the child's. He apparently could not understand what the woman was saying to him, and that frustrated the child. The child may have been totally accepting of this invisible visitor, but his mother was understandably frightened by the implications of the situation. She shared that discomfort with a few friends. They frequently reported seeing an apparition at a window on the second story. Today, some 20 years later, she does wonder if there was an element of teasing in their stories. But even if that were so, it wouldn't have explained her little boy's experiences. Haunted apartment to let. Donna and John, who have asked that their last name not be used, lived in Edmonton with their 4 children. Donna owns a busy retail outlet, and John is engaged in a successful professional practice. These are active, intelligent people, well aware of life's realities, and not given to flights of fancy. My family has known John, on a casual but ongoing basis, for the better part of 20 years. One day, he surprised me with the comment, "My wife wants you to call her." Fortunately, he quickly added the rider, "She has a ghost story for you." I did call Donna the next day, and she certainly did have a ghost story for me, one of the most dramatic I've ever heard. In 1991, when Donna decided to expand her Edmonton business, she chose a location in the resort town of Banff. Because operating this store would mean long and tiring periods away from home, Donna rented a large 2-story apartment. To give an idea of the size of the suite, Donna explained it was the top of a whole building. The place slept 12. Donna's background is in healthcare, and so it's not surprising that the first part of settling into her home away from home involved cleaning the apartment thoroughly. With that chore accomplished, she began to stay in the Banff apartment 1 day a week. Because the place was so big and her stays there so limited, Donna rented one of the downstairs bedrooms to a business associate. Donna retained a large upstairs bedroom. The first few months passed uneventfully. Then, without warning, the first in a long list of strange and frightening events occurred. I began to hear noises from the roof, she explained. It sounded like a team of guys stomping and dragging chains across the gravel roof. Although the noise disturbed her, Donna ignored it as best she could until one afternoon when her husband John accompanied her on the trip from Edmonton to Banff. They arrived tired from their long drive and lay down to have a nap. Before Donna could drift off to sleep, the noises on the roof began once again. Wanting to explain that this cacophony was a regular disruption during her stays in Banff, Donna turned to John. More than a little surprised, Donna stared at her husband laying beside her. He was fast asleep, apparently oblivious to the racket going on overhead. As the next few months were to disclose, this was the first in a series of incidents that only Donna seemed to be attuned to. Even with one full-time tenant and Donna's weekly visits, the apartment in Banff was still very much underutilized, and so when her store manager needed a place to live, Donna arranged for the woman to take one of the empty bedrooms. This bedroom was, like Donna's, also on the second floor, and so right below the roof. But the manager never complained of the noises that had disturbed Donna. Donna seemed to be the only one hearing the racket, and even her experiences with the noises were limited. "I only heard the chains on the roof if I tried to sleep," she acknowledged, before adding, "Then came the smell. Foul, intense odors that pervade an area for varying durations are frequently associated with the haunted place." Knowing that the place was scrupulously clean, Donna was puzzled and annoyed with the malodorous addition to her apartment. Worse as with the noises from the roof, Donna seemed to be the only one aware of the smell. I used potpourri to combat it, but that didn't solve the problem, she recalled. She remembered that the foul smell was so strong and had such a sudden onset that it seemed to her that instantly you were in the middle of it. Finally, her colleague, the store manager, also became aware of the foul odor, which Donna described as a stench like a combination of rotten meat and feces. The smell seemed to be concentrated in another big bedroom, and the two women wondered if possibly the vents in the room were bringing in the hideous odor from another part of the building. They checked out this possibility and were disturbed to find that their theory was incorrect. So far, whoever or whatever Donna was unwittingly sharing her apartment with had tried sound and smell to get her attention. The next sense the spirit appealed to was sight. Donna set up the scenario for me by describing the design of the kitchen. Exterior light to that room was provided by a skylight in the ceiling, and the kitchen doors were accented with gold-colored glass. I arrived at the apartment one night about 8, she recalled. It was a very black night. As seen from outside, the windows were all aglow with gold, as if my bedroom lights were on and shining through the gold glass. This phenomenon surprised and concerned Donna because she expected the apartment to be empty when she arrived. Understandably nervous, the woman entered the building, making as much noise as possible. She half expected to scare off an intruder, but the place was as empty as she expected it to be. Empty of people, that is, but filled with the foul odor. By the time she reached the kitchen, the glowing light she'd seen from outside had disappeared. On another occasion, Donna and John had invited a group of their friends for a ski weekend. Donna was the first one awake in the morning. She tidied the place up a bit, plugged in the coffee urns for their inevitable use. As she walked through the apartment, she was mortified to realize that the now familiar stench saturated the air yet again. She knew the place was clean. She also knew that her friends would be astonished by such an odor in one of her homes. After all, these people knew Donna and John well. They knew Donna's obsession with cleanliness. Some had even dubbed her Mrs. Clean. But here she was offering hospitality to friends when there was obviously filth somewhere in the place. Nothing but filth could account for a stench this rancid. The smell was throughout the whole place, but seemed to be concentrated under the staircase, right where the fax machine sat. Oddly, when her guests arose a little while later, no one commented on anything out of the ordinary. They seemed completely unaware of any sort of smell. As puzzled as she was relieved, Donna set about enjoying her weekend of comedy and skiing. Several months later, Donna was asleep in her home in Edmonton. She began to dream of the place in Banff and the horrid smell she had so often had to endure when she stayed there. In her dream, she was determined to track down the cause of the stench. I opened my tenant's bedroom door. A sheet of strong odor hit me, she described. It was so strong my eyes were watering. Then, for the first time, I'm thinking it's a body. In her nightmare, Donna made her way through the man's room to the end of the bedroom, leads to an open area. The smell was even stronger there, she recalled. Swinging open the door to the entire ensuite bathroom, she watched as her nightmare unraveled a horrific scene to her. The door hid a bloated body. I saw it through the mirror above the vanity. The body burst and splattered all over the wall. I backed out of the room and telephoned the guy who rented the room. I asked him, "Did you give anyone the key?" He said he hadn't. I hung up and called the police. In Donna's dream, the police arrived to find her standing frozen and mute, pointing to the bedroom door. At last, Donna was released from her terror by the return of consciousness. I woke up panting from the terror, she recalled. I looked at the clock radio and it was 2:49 a.m. Now whatever inhabited her Banff home was making itself felt even when Donna was hundreds of kilometers away. What she didn't know at the time was that she was sharing the frightening experience with her friend Mary, who was staying in the Banff apartment. Mary too awoke in terror at 2:49 a.m. that same night. She had been fast asleep when she felt a hand on her face. She awoke to find herself alone in the darkened room. The only light came from the luminous dial of the clock radio, indicating that it was 2:49. Perhaps the worst aspect of the two terrifying experiences was that despite their deep and long-standing friendship, both women were so shaken by their experiences that they could not bring themselves to discuss the strange events for a long time. It was many months later that they finally were able to confide in one another and at least find some sort of solace in the fact that they had related experiences. Mary circumvented the possibility of ever being exposed to that dark terror again by never staying another night in her friend's haunted apartment. For Donna, however, that was not an option, and so her experiences of terror continued. On another trip to the mountain town, Donna was alone in the apartment. She was in bed in the large room that she usually used. In addition to the queen-size bed where Donna lay, there were bunk beds and a single bed. As she lay in the dark trying to drop off to sleep, the woman felt a presence in the room. She turned on the light. There was nothing there, at least that she could see. She moved to the middle of her bed. Neither the light nor the move helped. I had a feeling of impending doom. I moved to my daughter's single bed. I shoved it up against the wall, said Donna, remembering her attempts to protect herself from an unseen evil. Eventually the feeling lessened and disappeared. During that experience, there was no rancid stench. Donna's long-suffering nature had coped with nearly enough by now. Unfortunately for Donna, the presence wasn't through. She went on to explain, "It shoved me on the shoulder. I was in the dressing area of the main bedroom, walking towards the bathroom, and someone shoved me. It was a sharp push. The feeling of being shoved is as unpleasant experience at any time, but certainly decidedly worse when you know for a fact, as Donna did, that you are the only person in the room. Living, even part-time, in a place that is haunted by something so clearly evil had taken its toll." Donna made some inquiries of locals about the history of the building that housed the strange suite. It was a bad story. There had been a little house on the land before. The old alcoholic lived there with his son. The man died in the house. I think it burnt down, she recalled having learned. That information triggered Donna's memory of her horrible nightmare about finding the body. I think the body in the dream had its hands tied behind its back. Someone's got to investigate, she concluded. Would Donna herself take on the research? No. I'd become so afraid that I got rid of the condo. And so somewhere in the town of Banff is there still an unavenged murder victim trying to draw attention to his unnatural end, or has the force exhausted itself by now and the man's spirit gone on to its eternal rest? Perhaps someone reading this account will be able to answer that question. Laurie's ghost. At the end of a meeting in Edmonton, the lady I'd been interviewing recommended that I contact her sister in Calgary. Her daughter-in-law has quite a story to tell, Mary Bruce advised. A few months later, while listening to Laurie's tale, I thought back to those words and realized what an understatement Mary's advice had been. Everyone just calls him by my ghost because he's always followed me, Laurie began. Laurie's haunting experiences began when she was a teenager. She and the rest of the members of her family were aware that there was something unusual going on, but no one addressed the feeling until one day Laurie had a friend visiting. The young man sat chatting with her in the living room until something in the hall appeared to catch his eye. Completely distracted from their conversation, the visiting teen stared intently into the hall as though watching something. Knowing that her friend was just seeing what all her family had been seeing, she attempted to reassure him. "Oh, don't mind him, he's our ghost," Laurie explained. That was the first time anyone in the family had acknowledged to another person a phenomenon that they'd been living with for some time. The family member who was most aware of the strange presence was their mongrel dog, ironically named Spooky. The mutt didn't accept the ghost nearly as easily as the human members of the family did. Spooky became very agitated when he sensed the spirit and would pace back and forth growling. Once the animal was barking at an unseen force in the kitchen. Laurie's mother picked the dog up and tried to carry it into the kitchen. That was the only time Spooky ever bit anyone, Laurie recalled. Whatever was in the kitchen obviously had Spooky spooked. His owner shared the dog's concern when tin plates began to come out of the kitchen wall, removed by some unseen force. Little did Laurie suspect at the time that these occurrences would become so frequent that she would grow to almost count on them. "I'm a very methodical person," Laurie explained. For this reason, even as a teenager, she liked to keep her belongings in an orderly manner and know where everything was at all times. But things started just disappearing and then reappearing, she added. Around this time, Laurie left home to live with a young couple. It didn't take the ghost long to track Laurie down. When pictures hung in her new home began coming off the walls, and a kitchen cupboard door cracked in half in the middle of the night, Laurie knew that her ghost had found her. During this period, the girl returned home briefly to help her mother settle into new accommodations. While Laurie was gone from the couple's home, they heard a baby crying there. They had children, but not a baby. They couldn't find the origin of the cries. Only Laurie's return, some days later, put an end to the mysterious sounds. Laurie moved again, this time into a nearby new townhouse. "My cat was psycho the whole time I lived there," she remembered. "One day I went out and left the drapes open. When I came back, they were closed. I was terrified to go into the place, but when I did, there was no one there." If that prank wasn't enough to let Laurie know that it had followed her once again, the persistent ghost went back to his old tricks of taking pictures off the walls. The young woman remembers the time living in the townhouse as a bad experience. Once again, Laurie moved, this time into a basement apartment of her future in-laws' home. "I was home alone one New Year's Eve. I heard footsteps coming down the basement stairs, then doors opening and closing, but there was no one there. Another time, someone got into bed with me. I had a water bed, and I could feel someone get into the other side," she recalled. Petrified, Laurie eventually corralled enough courage to roll over and face her unwelcome companion in the bed. There was nothing there, but you could see an indentation where someone's body had been, she added. Laurie always knew that her unseen and unwanted companion was around. The footsteps were always there, and pictures would never stay on the walls, she remarked. The young woman's patience grew thin. Suffering from badly strained nerves as a result of being forced to share her life with this presence, Laurie lost her temper and yelled at the specter. "I told him off," she explained. This solution brought temporary peace, but when Laurie's daughter was born, the ghost returned to visit the child. "When my child told me about a man being in her bedroom, I really had enough. I told her never to talk to him again. Then I yelled at the ghost again and told him I was throwing him out and that I didn't ever want him to come back. Every night for 3 years, I pictured a white light around our house. I knew that the light would protect us. He hasn't come back, and it's been 7 years now," she added. Laurie never actually saw her ghost. Despite not seeing it, she's sure that it was male. The being lacked a distinct size or form, although once, when she felt his presence, she did see a shadow that had no apparent source. This young woman had no hesitancy in sharing her story for publication, except for concern that it might attract her follower once again. I asked Laurie to let me know if he did come back, although other than allowing me to feel guilty about helping to destroy Laurie's newfound serenity, I'm not sure what my knowing would have accomplished. Thankfully, she hasn't contacted me, and so we can presume that Laurie is still sharing her life only with living beings. A visit from Uncle Marshall. Al Antisel of Lethbridge is a middle-aged man by now, but he clearly remembers an unusual visit from a relative during his childhood. I was just a little fella at the time. I was sleeping with my brother, who was 9 years older than me. I woke up and turned over. There was a man sitting on a chair beside our bed, he recalled. I was terrified and pulled the covers over my head. The frightened child attempts to hide under the covers woke his brother. "Are you sick or something?" the older boy inquired of his obviously distressed sibling. "No," Al remembers replying, "but I saw a man sitting beside the bed." "Who was it?" the brother asked. "I don't know. I've never seen him before," Al replied. In characteristics older brother fashion, the boy told Al in no uncertain terms that he had seen no such thing and should go back to sleep. The next morning, when he got up, the chair where I'd seen the man sitting and watching was still pulled up beside our bed. Of course my brother said I'd put it there, but I hadn't, Al explained. The incident was largely forgotten until one day when the children were looking through some old family photos. "That's him," Al remembers announcing excitedly after examining a particular snapshot. "That's the man who was sitting beside our bed that night." The person he identified was his Uncle Marshall, who had died even before Al's older brother had been born. Perhaps the deceased man merely wanted to enjoy a few minutes with the nephews he hadn't ever met.